The sound of silence. Deep in the Orion arm of the Milky Way, the research vessel TSS Euler drifted through the silence of space. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at her workstation, frowning at the unusual readings on her electromagnetic spectrum analyzer. For the third time in as many days, she was detecting patterns that shouldn't exist in the natural world. "Captain Morrison," she called out, her voice steady despite her excitement. "I think you need to see this." The captain, a tall woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen 40 years of space exploration, made her way to Sarah's station. She didn't rush. Nothing in deep space exploration rewarded hasty decisions, but there was purpose in her stride. "What have you found, Dr. Chen?" Sarah pulled up the visualization of her readings. "At first, I thought it was just background radiation with some unusual periodicity. But look at this." She overlaid multiple readings from the past 3 days. "It's music, Captain. There's no other way to describe it. The electromagnetic patterns are too complex, too ordered to be natural phenomena." Captain Morrison studied the patterns with the careful attention that had kept her crew alive through countless deep space missions. The visualization showed waves of energy that indeed seemed to flow like music, rising and falling in complex, but clearly intentional patterns. "Have you been able to locate the source?" Morrison asked, her fingers tracing the waveforms on the holographic display. "That's the fascinating part," Sarah replied, switching to a spatial view. "It's coming from everywhere around us. Not uniformly, but in a sphere roughly 40 light-years in diameter. We're near the edge of it." The bridge crew had gathered around now, drawn by the unusual conversation. Lieutenant James Rodriguez, their communications specialist, spoke up. "Could it be some kind of natural resonance? Maybe from a cluster of neutron stars?" Sarah shook her head. "The patterns are too varied, too intricate. Look at these harmonics." She isolated a segment of the data. "They're changing in response to each other. It's a conversation, or maybe even something more complex, like an ecosystem of sound." Captain Morrison straightened up, her decision made. "Dr. Chen, prepare a detailed analysis. Rodriguez, start working on a response protocol. If this is a conversation, we should be ready to join it." She turned to their navigation officer. "Lieutenant Park, plot a course deeper into the sphere. Let's find out who's playing this cosmic symphony." As the crew dispersed to their tasks, Sarah remained at her station, mesmerized by the patterns. 20 years of studying space phenomena hadn't prepared her for this moment. The electromagnetic songs grew stronger as they traveled deeper into the sphere, and soon they discovered something extraordinary. Their ship's own electromagnetic signature was causing subtle changes in the patterns around them. "Captain," Sarah called out again, 3 hours into their journey. "They know we're here. The patterns, they're adapting to our presence." The realization sent a ripple of excitement through the bridge. Humanity's first contact might not come with a dramatic appearance of alien ships or a decoded radio message, but through a dance of electromagnetic frequencies. Then something unexpected happened. As they penetrated further into the sphere, the ambient patterns began to shift dramatically. The complex harmony simplified, as if their audience was speaking more slowly, more deliberately. Sarah's eyes widened as she understood. "They're adjusting to our level," she whispered, like adults modifying their speech for a child. But there was something else, something that made her smile. "Captain, I don't think they realize that our relatively quiet electromagnetic signature is intentional, a result of our shielding technology. They seem to be interpreting our silence as wisdom." Captain Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Wisdom? In their symphony, they're treating our quiet presence with something that looks like reverence. They think we're choosing to speak softly, and in their culture, that appears to be deeply meaningful." The irony wasn't lost on anyone on the bridge. Humanity, often seen as the newcomers to the galactic stage, had accidentally presented themselves as masters of restraint and sophistication. Lieutenant Rodriguez's console lit up with new activity. "Captain, we're receiving more focused patterns now. They're like invitations, The harmonics are forming corridors of frequency, leading us somewhere. Captain Morrison took her seat in the command chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Well, crew, it seems we've made quite an impression without saying a word. Let's not disappoint our hosts. Lieutenant Park, follow those corridors. Dr. Chin, keep analyzing those patterns. Let's learn everything we can about our musical friends before we have to explain that we're not quite the electromagnetic monks they think we are. As the TSS Uller followed the harmonious pathways deeper into the sphere, the crew felt the weight of the moment. They had stumbled upon something extraordinary, and their accidental deception might just give humanity the chance to establish peaceful first contact with a civilization that spoke through the music of the cosmos itself. The next few hours were spent in careful navigation through the electromagnetic corridors. The patterns around them grew more complex, more beautiful, like an orchestra reaching its crescendo. Sarah worked tirelessly, mapping the patterns and beginning to understand their structure. "It's not just communication," she announced, her voice filled with wonder. "It's their entire civilization. These patterns, their cities, transportation networks, art galleries, libraries, all encoded in electromagnetic frequencies. We're being invited into their equivalent of a capital city." Captain Morrison stood at the viewport, watching the seemingly empty space ahead that she now knew was teeming with invisible life and culture. "Send a message back to Earth," she ordered. "Tell them we've made contact, but keep the details minimal. I have a feeling we're about to learn just how little we know about the true nature of civilization among the stars." As they approached what Sarah had identified as the heart of the electromagnetic city, the crew of the TSS Uller prepared themselves for humanity's next great leap into the unknown. Their silence, once simply a byproduct of their technology, had become their greatest diplomatic asset. Sometimes it seemed the most profound messages could be conveyed not through what was said, but through what was left unspoken. The crescendo. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 days after the TSS Uller entered the heart of the electromagnetic civilization. Sarah Chen had grown accustomed to the constant symphony of signals surrounding their ship, learning to interpret the subtle variations that indicated different aspects of the alien society. But now there was a discordant note in the harmony, a jarring disruption that sent ripples through the entire electromagnetic spectrum. "Captain, something's changing in the patterns," Sarah reported, her fingers dancing across her console as she analyzed the disturbance. "It's like..." Imagine a perfect symphony suddenly interrupted by random noise. Captain Morrison, who had been reviewing reports from Earth Command about their first contact situation, looked up sharply. "Natural interference." "No," Sarah replied, her voice tense. "The disruption is structured, but it's completely different from the harmonious collective's patterns. It's aggressive, designed to interfere with their communication networks." The bridge crew had dubbed their hosts the Harmonious Collective after spending days immersed in their musical civilization. The name seemed to fit a species that had built their entire society on the principles of electromagnetic harmony. Lieutenant Rodriguez's console erupted with activity. "Multiple new signals, Captain. The collective's patterns are changing. They're becoming more urgent, more complex." He paused, studying the readings. "I think they're afraid." Captain Morrison stood, moving to the main viewing screen where the electromagnetic patterns were displayed in vibrant colors. "Show me the source of the disruption." A new visualization appeared, showing angry red spikes of energy, cutting through the collective's blue-green harmonies. The disruptions were spreading like ink through water, corrupting the delicate patterns of communication that kept the collective's civilization functioning. "The collective is trying to adapt," Sarah observed, "but every time they shift their frequencies, the disruption follows. It's hunting them." "Hunting," Morrison repeated thoughtfully. "This isn't a natural phenomenon or random interference. This is an attack." As if confirming her words, new patterns emerged from the collective. Patterns they had learned to recognize as their equivalent of direct communication with the human ship. Sarah's translation algorithms, crude but functional, began interpreting the message. "They're calling them the discordant." Sarah translated, her voice growing more concerned as she read. Apparently, they're an ancient enemy of the collective, a species that evolved to prey on civilizations that rely on electromagnetic communication. Rodriguez added, "The collective is asking for our help, Captain. They think our mastery of silence might be the key to fighting back." Morrison's lips pressed into a thin line. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on her. The collective still believed humanity's minimal electromagnetic signature was a sign of advanced spiritual and technological development, rather than simply the result of practical shielding technology. "How much time do we have before these discordant reach the central networks?" Morrison asked. Sarah studied the spread patterns. "At the current rate of disruption, maybe 48 hours. Once they penetrate the core frequencies, they'll be able to shut down the collective's entire civilization. Their ships, their cities, their life support systems. Everything runs on these harmonic patterns." Morrison nodded slowly, an idea forming. "Dr. Chen, correct me if I'm wrong, but our electromagnetic shielding doesn't just contain our own emissions. It can actively dampen external signals as well, correct?" "Yes," Sarah confirmed, beginning to understand. "We use it to protect our sensitive equipment from solar flares and other intense electromagnetic events. The shielding creates what we call quiet zones in space. And could we modify these shields to create larger quiet zones, areas where both the collective signals and these discordant attacks would be dampened?" Sarah's fingers flew across her console, running calculations. "Theoretically, yes. We'd need to reconfigure our shield emitters and possibly sacrifice some of our own systems to power them. But we could create electromagnetic safe havens. The collective could retreat their most critical systems into these zones, while still maintaining enough of their standard patterns to keep their civilization running." Morrison turned to her engineering chief. "Commander Patel, how quickly can we modify our shields?" 6 hours for a prototype, Captain. Maybe 12 for a full-scale version." "You have 4, Morrison replied, then turned to address her entire crew. "The collective welcomed us peacefully and shared their civilization with us. We may not be the electromagnetic masters they think we are, but we're about to show them something humanity does better than anyone, adapting existing technology to solve new problems." As the crew rushed to their tasks, Morrison gazed out at the seemingly empty space around them, now knowing it was filled with an entire civilization under attack. They had come seeking new scientific discoveries, but had found themselves in the middle of a war fought not with missiles and beams, but with symphony and in silence. The next 4 hours were a blur of activity. Commander Patel's engineering team worked miracles with the shield systems, while Sarah and Rodriguez refined their understanding of the collective's communication patterns. They would only get one chance to implement their plan before the discordant reached the core networks. "Shield modifications ready, Captain," Patel reported, "right on schedule. We can generate a quiet zone roughly 5,000 kilometers in diameter. Any larger, and we risk system failures." Morrison nodded. "Dr. Chen, send a message to the collective. Tell them to prepare to move their most critical systems into our quiet zone. Lieutenant Rodriguez, start mapping safe corridors for their retreat. Commander Patel, stand by to activate the modified shields on my mark." As the crew executed their orders, Sarah's console displayed the collective's response. "Captain," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "they're not just accepting our help. They're sharing their most sacred harmonies with us, musical patterns they use to record their history. They're making us part of their story." Morrison allowed herself a small smile. "Let's make sure it's a story worth telling. All stations, prepare for quiet zone activation. Let's show the discordant that sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that chooses not to speak." The counterpoint. The first quiet zone bloomed into existence like a bubble of peace in the electromagnetic chaos. On the TSS Euler's displays, the constant symphony of the harmonious collective signals faded to a whisper within the protected sphere, while the aggressive spikes of the discordant's attacks dissipated harmlessly at its edges. Quiet zone stable. Commander Patel reported from engineering, his voice tense with concentration. Power consumption at 87% of maximum sustainable levels. Sarah Chen watched in fascination as the collective's patterns shifted and flowed, critical systems and vital communications retreating into the safety of the quiet zone with remarkable precision. They're adapting to the dampened signals beautifully, Captain. Their ability to maintain coherent communications, even at reduced power, is incredible. The discordant are responding, Lieutenant Rodriguez announced, highlighting new patterns on the main display. They're confused. Their attack patterns are becoming erratic. Captain Morrison studied the tactical display with careful attention. The discordant's disruption signals were indeed scattering, probing uselessly at the edges of the quiet zone like waves breaking against an invisible shore. It was working better than they'd hoped, but Morrison knew better than to celebrate too early. Status of the collective's critical systems, she asked. 93% secured within the quiet zone, Sarah replied. They're learning to operate in the dampened environment faster than we anticipated. The remaining systems are non-essential or decoys. The bridge crew watched as the discordant attacks intensified, trying to break through the quiet zone with brute force. But the laws of physics were on humanity's side. You couldn't disrupt signals that were already dampened to near nothingness. New signals from the collective, Rodriguez reported suddenly. They're offering us something. Dr. Chen, are you seeing this? Sarah's eyes widened as she analyzed the incoming patterns. Captain, they're sharing technical data with us. Specifications for their ships, their technology. She paused, double-checking her readings. They want us to create more quiet zones. They're showing us how to integrate our shielding technology with their systems. Morrison leaned forward in her chair. Can we do it? Better than that. Commander Patel cut in, already reviewing the technical data. Their power generation technology is far more efficient than ours. If we can interface with their systems, we could create a network of quiet zones, not just safe havens, but a strategic defense grid. The discordant are trying something new, Rodriguez warned. They're concentrating their attacks on a single point of the quiet zone. Power consumption is spiking. Morrison made her decision. Commander Patel, begin integration with the collective systems. Dr. Chen, coordinate with their engineers, or whatever they call their technical experts. Rodriguez, keep tracking those attack patterns. I want to know the moment the discordant changed tactics. The next few hours were a blur of activity as human and collective technology merged in ways neither species had imagined possible. The collective's mastery of electromagnetic energy combined with humanity's expertise in containing and controlling it created something entirely new. Additional quiet zones began appearing throughout the region, each one powered by a combination of human shield technology and collective energy systems. The discordant's attacks became increasingly desperate as their hunting grounds were systematically denied to them. They're pulling back, Rodriguez reported, tracking the discordant signals as they retreated. No, wait. They're regrouping. Multiple signals converging about 2 light minutes from our position. Sarah's console lit up with urgent patterns from the collective. Captain, the collective is warning us. They say this is typical discordant behavior before a massive assault. They're going to throw everything they have at us. Morrison nodded grimly. Then we'll give them everything we've got. Commander Patel, status of the Quiet Zone Network. 14 zones established and stable, Captain. Power consumption optimized through the collective systems. We can maintain this indefinitely. Dr. Chen, can we extend the network between the zones? Create safe corridors. Sarah consulted with the collective through their now refined communication channels. Yes, but it would thin our coverage. The discordant might be able to punch through the weaker areas. That's exactly what we want them to try, Morrison said, a slight smile playing at her lips. Sometimes the best trap is the one that looks like a weakness. Work with the collective to create those corridors, but be ready to collapse them on my signal. As they prepared for the discordant's final assault, Morrison reflected on the strange turns that had brought them here. They had come seeking scientific discoveries and found themselves in the middle of an interstellar conflict. But more than that, they had found a way to turn humanity's perceived limitations into an asset. The Discordant's attack, when it came, was both beautiful and terrifying. The electromagnetic spectrum erupted with their signals, no longer just disruption patterns, but what appeared to be their full language, their full culture, expressed as a weapon of pure chaos. "They're moving into the corridors," Rodriguez reported, tension evident in his voice. All attack channels concentrated on the gaps between the quiet zones. Morrison waited until the discordant forces were fully committed to their assault. "All stations, execute Operation Silence." The trap was sprung. The corridors between quiet zones collapsed, and new zones bloomed into existence around the discordant forces. But these weren't safe havens. They were prisons of silence. Cutting the discordant off from the electromagnetic spectrum, they relied upon not just for hunting, but for their very existence. "Discordant signals are fragmenting," Sarah reported, watching their enemies' patterns dissolve into confusion. "They can't maintain cohesion without their electromagnetic links." The collective was right. The discordant aren't just hunters of electromagnetic civilizations. They're completely dependent on the electromagnetic spectrum themselves. The victory, when it came, was marked not by explosions or destruction, but by silence. The discordant, trapped in zones of electromagnetic darkness, had no choice but to retreat from collective space entirely. As the threat receded, new patterns emerged from the collective. Patterns of celebration, of gratitude, and of profound respect. But they were different now. The reverence for humanity's mastery of silence had been replaced by genuine admiration for their ingenuity and willingness to help. "They know, don't they?" Sarah asked quietly. "They've figured out that our electromagnetic quietness wasn't some spiritual achievement." Morrison nodded. "They know, but I don't think it matters anymore. We proved ourselves not through some imagined wisdom, but through real actions and innovations. Sometimes the truth is better than the legend." The resonance. The weeks following the discordant's retreat brought unprecedented changes to both human and collective civilization. The TSS Uller had become a hub of frenetic activity as more human ships arrived, each carefully shielded and moving with deliberate electromagnetic grace through collective space. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at her familiar station, but the displays before her had evolved far beyond simple signal analysis. The visualization now showed a complex dance of human and collective communications, two fundamentally different approaches to technology learning to work in harmony. "The latest integration tests are complete, Captain," she reported to Morrison, who was conferencing with both Earth Command and collective representatives. "The hybrid communication systems are performing beyond our initial projections." The main screen showed a stunning visualization of their joint achievement. A network of quiet zones and controlled electromagnetic corridors that served as both defense system and communication highway. Human ships moved through silent lanes, while collective signals pulsed through their own channels, the two systems complementing each other perfectly. "Earth Command is pleased," Morrison noted, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Though I think they're still trying to wrap their heads around the concept of an entire civilization based on electromagnetic harmonies." "The collective's latest transmission is interesting," Rodriguez added from his station. "They're proposing something new. They want to teach us their harmonic language." This caught everyone's attention. The collective's method of communication was far more than just a means of transmitting information. It was the foundation of their entire society, their art, their history, their very way of thinking. "They're not just offering to teach us their language," Sarah realized, studying the patterns. "They want to learn from us too. Our methods of containing and controlling electromagnetic emissions. They see applications we hadn't even considered." Commander Patel joined the conversation from engineering, where he had been working with collective engineers on further refinements to their hybrid technology. "It makes sense. We've been so focused on controlling and minimizing electromagnetic emissions, while they've mastered the art of using them. Together, we can create something entirely new. Morrison finished. Dr. Chen, work with Rodriguez and Pottle. I want a proposal for a joint human collective research initiative. Let's see what happens when we combine their mastery of harmony with our mastery of silence. The next few days saw the beginning of an unprecedented exchange of knowledge and culture. Human scientists learned to speak in the collective's harmonic patterns, while collective engineers began understanding the principles behind human electromagnetic shielding. But it was more than just technical exchange. As Sarah delved deeper into the collective's harmonic language, she discovered layers of meaning that transcended simple communication. It's amazing, she shared with Morrison during one of their daily briefings. Their harmonics don't just convey information. They carry emotional context, historical references, even philosophical concepts. When they speak about our victory over the discordant, the pattern includes echoes of ancient harmonies that tell stories of other times they faced extinction and survived. And how do they tell our part in that story? Morrison asked, curious. Sarah smiled. That's the beautiful part. They've created a new harmony for us, a pattern that represents humanity. Well, listen. She activated a sequence that filled the room with a visible representation of electromagnetic waves. The pattern was unlike anything they'd seen from the collective before. A complex interplay of silence and signal, strength and subtlety. They've woven our characteristics into the harmony, Sarah explained. The quiet sections represent our electromagnetic restraint, but they're not empty. They're purposeful, structured. The active sections show our capacity for decisive action, for innovation. The whole pattern speaks of a species that chooses its moments carefully, but acts with conviction when needed. Morrison listened to the visual representation of humanity through the collective's perspective, feeling a profound sense of pride. They really understand us now, don't they? Not as the silent masters they first imagined, but as we truly are. Better than that, Sarah replied. They've helped us understand ourselves in a new way. We've always seen our electromagnetic limitations as something to overcome. They've shown us how to turn those same limitations into advantages. The bridge crew watched as a collective ship passed by their viewport, its passage marked by a beautiful display of harmonic signals that somehow managed to complement the quiet bubble of human shielding around the Uller. We've received a new proposal from their Council of Harmonies, Rodriguez announced. They want to establish permanent joint settlements, cities where both our species can live and work together. They're calling it the Symphony of Silence. Morrison considered the proposal, watching the seamless integration of human and collective technologies around them. What had begun as a chance encounter had evolved into something far more significant, a partnership that promised to reshape their corner of the galaxy. Tell them we accept, she said, but suggest a slight modification to the name. After all, we're not just bringing silence to their symphony. Sarah caught the captain's meaning and began composing a response in the collective's harmonic language. The new pattern she created suggested a different name, the harmonic balance. As the crew watched the pattern ripple out through space, carrying their response to the collective, they could sense they were witnessing the beginning of something extraordinary. Two civilizations, one born of electromagnetic symphony, and one that had mastered electromagnetic silence, learning to create something greater than either could achieve alone. The symphony, 5 years after the TSS Urler's first contact with the harmonious collective, the region of space they shared had become unrecognizable. Where once there had been only the invisible waves of the collective's electromagnetic civilization, now there existed something unprecedented, a hybrid society that had turned the very contrast between human and collective nature into its greatest strength. Sarah Chen, now Director of Human Collective Integration, stood in the observation dome of Unity Station, the first joint settlement built by the two species. The station was a marvel of engineering that embodied the principles of both civilizations. Zones of carefully maintained electromagnetic quiet existed alongside areas of rich harmonic activity, with transition spaces that demonstrated how silence and symphony could coexist and complement each other. Remarkable view, isn't it? Captain Morrison's familiar voice came from behind her. The captain had recently been promoted to admiral, but to her original crew, she would always be the captain who had guided them through first contact. Every time I look at it, I see something new, Sarah replied, gesturing at the space around them. To normal human eyes, it would have appeared empty save for the distant stars. But through the station's enhanced viewing systems, they could see the intricate dance of electromagnetic signals that formed the lifeblood of their joint civilization. Human ships moved through carefully maintained quiet corridors, their advanced shielding now integrated with collective harmonics to create paths that were both silent and musical. Collective vessels sailed on waves of electromagnetic energy, their systems now refined through human innovation to be more efficient and controlled than ever before. Earth Command's latest report just came in, Morrison said, moving to stand beside her former science officer. The application of collective harmonic principles to our communication systems has revolutionized everything from deep space navigation to medical imaging. And that's just the beginning. Sarah nodded, thinking of the countless breakthroughs they'd achieved together. The collective's latest achievements are equally impressive. By incorporating our principles of electromagnetic control, they've expanded their civilization's range by orders of magnitude. They can maintain stable harmonics across distances that would have been impossible before. A new pattern caught their attention, a complex harmony that rippled through the space around the station. Both women smiled, recognizing it as the signature of the latest joint project. A network of relay stations that combined human shielding technology with collective harmonic transmission methods to create a communication system that was both incredibly efficient and virtually immune to interference. Have you heard the latest composition from the Cultural Exchange Center? Morrison asked. Sarah activated a nearby console, and the observation dome filled with a visualization of the piece, a stunning collaboration between human musicians and collective harmony shapers. Human music, translated into electromagnetic patterns, intertwined with collective harmonies in ways that would have seemed impossible years ago. The result was something entirely new, an art form that could be both heard and seen, experienced simultaneously through human and collective senses. They're calling it the bridge, Sarah explained. It tells the story of our first contact, the discordant crisis, and everything that came after. But it's more than just a historical record. It's a blueprint for the future. The composition showed how far both species had come from their first misconceptions. The collective no longer saw human electromagnetic silence as mystical wisdom, but their respect had only grown as they discovered humanity's true gifts: innovation, adaptability, and the ability to turn apparent limitations into strengths. Similarly, humans had learned that the collective's electromagnetic symphonies were far more than just communications. They were a way of experiencing and understanding the universe itself. "We've got visitors coming," Morrison noted, checking a notification. The first delegation from the Rimward systems. Apparently, word of our success has spread. Sarah wasn't surprised. What they had built here was unprecedented. A civilization that proved different species could do more than just coexist. They could take their very differences and use them to create something greater than either could have achieved alone. "You know what the collective says about them?" Sarah asked, a slight smile playing at her lips. "They say these new visitors are different from both of us. They communicate through gravitational wave manipulations." Morrison laughed. "Let me guess. We're already drawing up plans for integration." "Of course. The collective's harmonic expertise combined with our experience in field containment, we think we can create interfaces that would allow all three forms of communication to work together. Imagine it, Admiral, a civilization built on symphony, silence, and gravity itself. They stood together, watching the endless dance of ships and signals around the station. In the distance, construction had already begun on new facilities to welcome their potential allies. The hybrid patterns of human collective technology shifted and flowed, making space for something new. It all started with a misunderstanding, Morrison mused. They thought our silence was wisdom, but in working together, we all found wisdom we never knew we had. Sarah nodded, remembering those first tentative communications 5 years ago. The collective has a saying now, in harmony or in silence, all voices have their place in the universal symphony. As if in response to her words, a new pattern bloomed in the space around them, a perfect blend of human precision and collective artistry, announcing the arrival of another day in their shared civilization. It was neither symphony nor silence, but something in between, something new. The sound of different species learning to make music together. The delegation from the Rimward systems would arrive soon, bringing their own unique voice to add to this grand experiment. But Sarah and Morrison knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, the principles they had discovered here would light the way. That strength could be found in limitation, that differences could become advantages, and that the space between symphony and silence could give birth to wonders yet unimagined.